Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 26th part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who stuck around during my time away recently. Let's take that positive energy and shoot for the stars, Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 52, His Eyes Are Cold, Say That to My Face. Chapter by Roxi2Star. They'd passed the first round. Shoto couldn't deny it. He was relieved. He was glad he and Izuku had both made it through together. Shiro, Shinsu, and Eureka had all passed with them, which had been a relief. The five of them stood in the waiting room, waiting on their other classmates. They didn't have much time left if they were going to make it. The Kugu came stomping inside, Kaminari and Kirishima at his tail. Izuku gave a cheery wave. Kikin. You guys made it. Of course we fucking did. The Kugu growled, stopping in front of Izuku. I told you. We were all gonna pass just fine. Just gotta make it through the next round and we're heroes, he said and flicked Izuku on the nose. His boyfriend only laughed in response. Shoto smiled at the soft scene. It was nice to see Izuku being close with someone he cared about. Perhaps once upon a time he'd have been jealous, but it was clear there was no underlying romantic tension between them. Nice going Denki, Shinsu said next to him. Kaminari was standing in front of him, rubbing the back of his head. Glad we're going forward together. Kaminari was pink in the face. Why yeah dude. You and me. Taking on the pro hero scene. He said can't wait Hitachi. After he said that, Shiro tackled him and Kirishima into a hug. Whoa bro. I'm glad you passed too. He said, wrapping an arm around Shiro. Eureka jumped onto Shiro's back, the whole group tumbling over with laughter. Izuku giggled at the scene, leaning in closer to Shoto. I'm worried. Ida isn't back yet, he said softly. Think he'll be okay. It's Ida, Shoto said simply. He'll pull through, even if he's the last person to do it. Shinsu nodded. Yeah man. Never doubt our mom like that. The Kugu. A new voice called. The group turned, as the Shiketsu students approached. Shoto noticed the girl wasn't with them. Good. He was fairly certain he'd have some unpleasant things to say to her. The speaker was the student covered in hair, flanking him was the Yoarashi guy from earlier. He was smiling happily, though when he and Shoto's eyes briefly met, he glared. I'd like to apologize on behalf of Shishigura. He's a bit stubborn and tries to make everyone bend to his point of view. The Kugu hummed in response. Well, I kicked his ass, so he can fucking suck a dick. Kikin. Izuku reprimanded. Be nice. Point is, we'd like to have a friendly relationship with UA. So I hope you can accept our apology, the hairy student said. Didn't need one in the first place, the Kugu said, crossing his arms. We fought. He lost like a bitch. And besides, it's his fault, not yours. You're not responsible for his actions. Something about this seemed off. If these guys wanted a friendly relationship with UA, then why was the girl so creepy, and why did Yaorashi keep glaring at him? So, Shoto spoke up. Hey, buzz cut, Shoto called. Yaorashi looked back at him, frowning. Did I do something to upset you? Oh ho, Yaorashi said, his voice full of venom. Nah, it's nothing like that. He titled his head. It's because you're Endeavor's son. He felt Izuku stiffen next to him. A sense of dread hit Shoto coming from him. It felt like someone had just pierced a knife into his back. You've changed a lot since we last met. But your eyes. Just like his. Cold. His eyes were cold? He brought a hand up to rest on his left eye as the world seemed to stop. He was like Endeavor? He was cold? Did other people see that too? Did Izuku? Izuku had always said he liked the blue eye he'd inherited from his father. Said it was soft. Was that a lie? Would Izuku lie like that? Probably. He loved Izuku dearly, but he knew lying was pretty second nature to his boyfriend. That was probably something they should talk about. If his eyes were cold like Endeavor's, what else about him was like that man? Would he grow violent? His father hadn't been born an abuser. Shoto really should never have children. If he and Izuku married, would he treat him poorly too? Izuku hated his father, would he break up with Shoto if he became more like him? Excuse me, Izuku asked, with a loud stomp of his foot. I'm sorry. But can you please repeat what the fuck you just said? He asked, stepping between Shoto and Yaorashi. His aura was, well, mildly terrifying. He was nearly a foot shorter than him, but even Yaorashi looked concerned. Izuku let out a small laugh, because it sounded like you just implied my Shoto was an asshole like his dad? Which is insane because you met him, like what, twice? You don't know anything about him. He glared up at him. Say it again. I dare you. Yaorashi looked alarmed. He met Shoto's eye. Shinsuke grabbed the capture gear around his neck, though he looked angry as well. Bakugo was grinning like a madman watching the scene unfold. His eyes are cold. Like endeavors. Izuku jumped, arm swinging in for a punch. Shinsu had his capture gear around him, pulling him back. Let me go, Shinsu. He thrashed, floating up into the air. Right. He could do that now, I'm serious, let go. I'm gonna kick this stupid motherfucker's face off. He snarled, you hear me? I'll kick your ass. I've faced down certain death no less than 6 separate times. I can take you in a fight any fucking day of the week. Saying hurtful shit to my boyfriend. He fought the restraints as Shinsuke pulled him back down. Shoto wrapped his arms around Izuku-bun. Hey, relax, he said softly, it's not a big deal. He and Shinsuke had to work to keep him restrained. It's not worth it. If you get into a fight you'll likely be failed on the spot. Potentially banned from the test. Izuku sighed, relaxing in his grip, but kept his eyes on Yaorashi. I'm serious. If I ever see you in the real world, your ass is grass. Coming here and saying ignorant bullshit like that. Fuck you. Izuku spat at his feet. Oh wow, Yaorashi said, before he began to laugh, this little guy is hilarious. I like your passion. That's how a hero should be. Coming to defend your boyfriend with such a ferocious look in your eye. He praised, man, how did such a cold person land such a cute hot-blooded guy? Izuku growled and went for the attack again. Shoto and Shinsu nearly lost their grip on him as green electricity surrounded his body. Bakugo had to step in, placing his hands on Izuku's shoulders as he floated up to yell over his spiky head, go fuck yourself. He yelled. Damn it, Deku, usually I live for this shit, but fuck, keep it together. You heard what he said. I can't let that slide. He growled, no one says that kind of awful thing about my Shoto. Yaorashi just laughed. He smiled, whipping away a fresh tear, oh man. That's funny. Well. Gotta be off. He said and turned, and he and the hairy student walked away together, with Yaorashi laughing all the while. Izuku. Shoto whispered, please calm down. He sighed, fine. He went limp and touched back down on the ground. So when the fuck did you start floating? Bakugo asked. Izuku sighed, it's new, he said, like 10 minutes ago, new. He turned to Shoto once Shinsu let him go. He grabbed Shoto and pulled him down into a sweet kiss. Listen to me, he said after pulling away and knocking their foreheads together. Yaorashi has no clue what the fuck he's talking about. You're Shoto. Not Enji. Your eyes aren't cold, they're soft and sexy, and I love them. So. Don't let that guy into your head, okay? Just focus. We're going to make it through this, so just breathe. Shoto wrapped his arms around his waist and pulled him close. He noticed Shinsu and Bakugo turned away, but kept close, as if shielding them from the rest of the world. He had such great friends. He buried his face into Izuku's hair. He smelled like his shampoo, apples, and vaguely of cigarette smoke. They stood like that until the rest of the class came in, securing the rest of the spots. All of 1A had made it through. A rescue operation. Izuku grinned as they ran back into the field. They'd just been given the instructions. Rescuing fake injured people who also served as their judges. They hadn't told them what the grading scale would be, so Izuku was just going to do this by the books. Rescues were what being a hero was really all about. He and Shoto ran step in step towards the wrecked city area. With your ice we'll be able to keep potentially unstable buildings from falling apart, Izuku said. Right. You're faster than I am. I'll leave carrying those 2 injured back to the triage those students are setting up, Shoto said back. Izuku felt his heart flutter, we're like a pro-hero team right now. Shoto's face turned pink, a soft secret smiling playing at his lips, we are. Let's keep on task. Right. Izuku jumped into the field. The first person they came across was a crying child. At least Izuku assumed it was supposed to be a child. He cried, my grandpa is stuck. I can't find him. He wailed. Izuku kneeled down in front of him. It's okay. Shadow, can you start moving the debris? He asked him. Shadow nodded and got to work. Can you stand? He asked the child. He shook his head, crying, okay. Hold on to me, I'll take you to the others, they'll get you patched up. Don't worry about your grandpa, we're gonna find him. Just you wait, he said with a brilliant smile. He scooped the child up. I think I saw Okako over there, I'll send her your way to help with the rebel. I'll be back. Shadow waved, still carefully using his eyes to move the mass of debris. Izuku jumped, using one for all to propel him forward as fast as he could. Float came surprisingly easy to him as he gently landed each time, trying to not hurt the child. He soon reached the triage center the other hero students had made. Here. He called, landing gently in front of a girl in a blue costume. He says he can't walk. Please make sure he's given medical attention. Thank you, she said, taking him from Izuku's arms. I'll be back with more. He cried and jumped away back towards Shadow. He stopped only to motion for Okako, who'd been heading that way, to follow. They reached Shadow together. Any luck with the grandpa? He asked him. Nothing yet. Shadow said. Izuku nodded. I'll start moving some rebel. Okako yelled, running to another pile and started using her quirk. Izuku in turn closed his eyes. He wished he could whip out his rabbit ears. They had a much better sense of hearing. He sighed and just kept going, using his strength to move large and solid pieces of rebel. Deku. Okako called. I found him. Don't worry, sir, you're saved. Izuku bounced over. The old man was caught under a piece of rebel. It took a bit of work from them, but he was freed here. I'll take you back to the triage. Your grandson is there, he said gently, picking the old man up. Is that comfortable? Oh yes, he said, thank you. You two keep moving, I'll. His words were cut off by a massive explosion. A huge hole had been busted open in the side wall. Gang Orca in the blast, his underlings pouring in. A voice filled the stadium. Villains are attacking, please keep them at bay while continuing to rescue the civilians. Oh man, Izuku mumbled. What should he do? Keep on task or fight the villains? He looked down at the feeble old man in his arms. He should keep on task. Civilians always came first. I'm going into the fight, Shadow said. My quick is more suited for fighting than rescue. Right. Okako and I will stay here. Good luck, Shadow. He called, watching his boyfriend run into the battle. Don't worry, sir, you're safe with us, he said. Let's get you to triage. He jumped, using one for all and float to get him to safety. He made sure the grandpa and little boy were reunited before he ran back into the field. He kept up his self-assigned job of carrying people back to triage. All the while he kept his eye on the fight with the villains. It seemed Shadow and Yaorashi had taken to fighting Gang Orca himself. That probably wasn't good. A flash of blue fire alerted Izuku. It was swept up in Yaorashi's wind and was heading right towards, oh god, what was his name? Shindo. That was it. Izuku jumped in a flash of green electricity. He pulled Shindo up over his shoulder and landed a few feet away from the blast. You okay? He asked him. Fine. Gang Orca hit me and I couldn't move, he said. Just set me down, I got it. My quirk is vibrations, so I should be able to move in a moment. He nodded and placed Shindo down. Please stay safe, he said before he turned his attention onto Shadow and Yaorashi. They were arguing. Damn it, Shadow, keep this up, and he was going to fail. Shadow. He called out to him, I love you, but you need to get it together. He moved my flames off their target. Shadow shouted, pointing at Yaorashi. I can't fight properly if he's going to. Shadow. Izuku yelled. Gang Orca had sent off an attack, stunning both him and Yaorashi. They laid on the ground, unable to move. He landed in front of them, summoning his shield as another sound attack blasted through the air. I've got you, he said. Can either of you move? Yaorashi looked up. I can still use my quirk, he said. I should be able to make a small tornado. Blue and red fire sparked to life on Shadow's left side. I can make fire, but I can't control it. If you make enough I can direct it with my wind. Okay, Shoto said. Izuku, please move out of the way. I don't want you to get hurt. Don't gotta tell me twice. Izuku jumped away from them as together they created a large tornado full of blue fire. Yaorashi had surprising control despite not being able to move much. He used it to surround Gang Orca. His minions were being trapped by other hero students, the hairy Shiketsu student doing quite a bit of the heavy lifting. Izuku floated up to get a better look. It seemed the others were getting the injured out just fine. He hadn't seen or heard anything from Kiken. He hoped he was alright. Gang Orca gave a cry, his sound waves making the tornado dissipate. He took a step forward. Now what? Gang Orca asked Shoto and Yaorashi. He was going to go in for an attack. Not on Izuku's watch. Izuku let himself fall. Smash! He cried, the heel of his foot making contact with Gang Orca's back. The air pressure was intense. Gang Orca took the hit, falling to his knees. 15% smash was no joke. Sorry, but I won't allow you to hurt them. Oh wow, Gang Orca said. That was an impressive hit. He held up his hand. It's over though. Every last victim has been rescued. I declare this test over. The voiceover said the scores will be posted once all the points are tallied. The injured should let the medical team look them over. Everyone else, get changed and watch for instructions. Izuku let himself land. Oh. Good. Also thank you, sir. He bowed to Gang Orca. I'm a huge fan. Wait, he turned towards his prone boyfriend Shoto. Thank you again, sir, but I gotta fuck it. Shao-chan. He ran towards him and helped him up. Are you okay? Shoto was shaking a bit. I really fucked up. Hey, don't think like that. Izuku said. Can you walk at all? He asked, and Shoto shook his head. Izuku scooped him up in a bridal style. He watched out of the corner of his eye as the other Shiketsu students came to pick Yaorashi up off the ground. You did get a bit sidetracked, but you still did great work beforehand, and you two put aside your differences for a super cool attack together. He began to walk them back to the changing rooms. Izuku, I think I might have failed, he said softly, leaning his head into his neck. You don't know that, he said. We have no idea what their grading scale is. I'll admit it was pretty dumb for you and Yaorashi to get into a fight, but that was just as much his fault as it is yours. Don't beat yourself up, he said. Even if you did fail, it'll be okay, he promised. They were back in their uniforms. Shoto could walk again, thank God. They had been put back into the field, as the examiners gave a speech in front of a massive board. Any moment now they'd reveal it, and show all who passed. Izuku crossed his fingers. He wanted them both to pass so badly. Shoto deserved it. Had it not been for that stupid Yaorashi guy, God, if Izuku ever ran into him again he'd put all his street fight experience into use. Here's the results, the examiner said in a bored voice. Izuku's eyes scanned the board. He found the MS. Where was it? Midoriya Izuku. He'd passed. Tears formed in his eyes. I did it, he cried. He was sobbing already. He'd done it. He passed. He had his provisional hero license. He could do real hero work, as long as he was with a fully licensed pro or it was an emergency. Tears streamed down his face. He'd done it. Shoto, he turned to his boyfriend. Shoto wasn't smiling. His face was stony as his eyes were locked on the board. Oh no. Izuku looked back. He found the TS. Shoto's name wasn't there. Shoto had failed. I figured, Shoto said softly. Oh, baby, Izuku cried, hugging him tightly. Shoto didn't hug back. Just standing there with his arms at his side. It's okay, Izuku said softly. Shoto sighed. I'm happy you passed. You really deserved it. You did too. He pulled back, looking up at him. I'm so sorry. Todoroki. A voice called. Izuku let his arms drop as Yaorashi came barreling towards them. Rage ignited in Izuku's gut. If Yaorashi was going to blame Shoto for Yaorashi began, before bowing deeply. So sorry. He cried. It was my fault. If I had just moved past my own personal grudge I wouldn't have caused us both to fail. Shoto looked taken aback. Don't worry, he said softly. It's just as much my own fault. I got in my own head. Deku-kun. Okako's voice called, interrupting them. She Shinsu, and Ida were running right towards them. We all passed. She cried and threw her arms around his shoulders. I passed. Shinsu cried and tackled the both of them, causing the three of them to fall into a heap on the ground. Izuku grunted under their weight. Shinsu was crying. I never thought I'd make it here, but I passed. Mito, I'm gonna be a hero. He looked at Shoto. We did it, Roki. Shoto offered a soft smile. I'm happy for you. Ida frowned and placed a hand on his shoulder. I didn't see your name on the board, he said softly. Shinsu stood up at once. What? Are they crazy? He asked before turning to the board. Holy shit, Roki, I'm sorry. No, Shoto said. Really, it's fine. He sighed. It was my own fault. I failed for a reason. I'm just not ready. He gave a shudder. Endeavor isn't going to be happy. Ice hit Izuku's veins. He pushed him and Okako up. Don't worry, he won't be able to touch you at UA. He ran to Shoto's side. You're going to be okay. The rest of the squad pulled in, enveloping them into a group hug. Thank you. Shoto whispered. Izuku had almost forgotten Yorashi standing there. He peeked out from Shoto's shoulder, and over Okako's bob. He sent a soft glare his way before hugging Shoto harder. Oh. The board examiner said, and one more thing. If you failed, you'll be allowed to take a 10-week remedial course, after which you'll be awarded your provisional hero license. Shoto's entire body went slack with relief. Izuku, Okako, Shinsu, and Ida all yelled in joy, hugging him tighter. You're gonna get your license. Izuku yelled. Oh Shoto, he kissed his cheek. You can do this. I can, he said. They all pulled back away from him as Shoto turned his attention to Yairishi. Guess. I'll see you there. Of course. Yairishi said. I still don't like you, so I apologize in advance. I'll see you then. He turned tail and walked back to the Shiketsu students. What a freak, Shinsu said. Come on. Let's find the rest of the class. I think everyone else passed well. Almost everyone. Izuku blinked. Wait, who else failed? He looked back to board. He started checking names. Oh no. Kikin failed too. The whole class walked back to the dorms together. Everyone but Kikin and Shoto had passed. Kikin was upset. He'd barely spoken a word to anyone. Izuku had considered trying to comfort him, but he sort of had his hands full with Shoto. Besides, Kirishima seemed to have a handle on it. Shoto was much better now that he had a way forward. It would take another 10 weeks, but he'd catch up to them. They walked as a group, Shoto and Izuku, towards the front. Their hands intertwined. The dorm came into view. Izuku stopped in his tracks. Dad and Toshinori were standing on the porch waiting for them. Izuku broke out into a grin and made a run toward his dad. I passed. He cried. Most of the class waved to them, saying hello as they made their way inside. Izuku wrapped his arms around his dad, tears streaming down his face again. I did it. I have my. He pulled back and pulled his wallet out and shoved the little piece of plastic in his face. Look. Now, it was just them and Shoto outside. That's so wonderful, Izuku, Dad said with a soft smile. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Toshinori hadn't spoken yet. What's wrong? He asked. What happened? Dad sighed and turned to Shoto. How did you do? Shoto looked down at his feet. Failed. He nodded. That's okay. Listen, why don't you go inside and commiserate with the others? We need to talk to Izuku. Panic flooded him. Is everything okay? Shoto asked, stepping to Izuku's side. Toshinori put a hand on Dad's shoulder. We should probably talk to him too. It concerns both of them. Dad sighed. Yeah. It's not like we can talk to his father about this. He turned back to them. Let's go for a walk, he said and led the way. I think I'm going to get very loud and I'd rather your friends didn't hear. Izuku gripped Shoto's hand tightly as they followed after him. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on? When we get further away, Dad said. But Fujikawa-san gave me a call this morning. Said my nephew was a very nice man. And how kind it was that I was letting him live in our apartment. Oh no. Izuku said. So you met Tuya? Oh shoot. Izuku's in trouble. Oh well. If you ask me, I think it'll be worth it in the end for Daddy's smirking face. While we're here, why not give you the question of the day? Have you ever been caught doing something behind your parents' backs? What was it? While you're thinking about that, if you're enjoying the videos so far, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. They really help push our community to more and more people. Okay, got your comment submitted? Wonderful. Now we can get back to the episode. Chapter 53, Breakdown. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Izuku followed his father to a bench, near the woods that were on the back of UA's property. They were far away from the other buildings. Secluded. Izuku felt like his face was going to burn. He felt sick. Dad must be pissed. Toshinori sat down on the bench as Shoto stood next to Izuku. Dad was pacing. So, his father began, I have to ask. Where do you get off letting a stranger into your mother's home without asking me? He asked. His voice was low, but Izuku could hear the thinly veiled rage. Did you think I wouldn't help? He asked, or did you think at all when you just told Dabi, oh yeah, here you go strange man, this is where the spare keys to the house are? Well. Tears were already gathering at the corner of his eyes. I wanted him. You are 16. You're not a hero yet. You have to talk to me about this kind of stuff. Dad yelled. You're lucky that Dabi is a good house guest. Had anything happened to your mother's apartment I would have. He cut himself off. Midoriya Izuku, I am so disappointed in you. The words were like a punch to the gut. He let out a broken sob, hugging his arms to his chest. I'm sore. And the smoking? Dad asked, is that true? Tuya had told him about the smoking? He nodded yeah, but Dad. Don't. Dad yelled. Izuku, do you have any idea how stupid that is? Underage smoking is the kind of thing that can be put on your permanent record. You're trying to be a hero, for God's sake. That means you'll be under public scrutiny. And people are harsh. Izuku. I know you're smoking because you went through something terrible. I know that, but the rest of the world isn't going to care. I know. Izuku yelled through tears. I want to stop. Dad kept on. No. You don't get to cut me off. Saying you know. If you know, then why the hell did you do it in the first place? You're smarter than that, Izuku. Your mother raised you better. I thought I raised you better than this. Dad pinched the bridge of his nose. The only good thing I can say is you seem to have smartened up enough to agree to therapy. Because let me tell you, you are going. He sighed. I just don't get it, Izuku. Why did you do this? Why didn't you talk to me? I don't know, Izuku said quietly. Izuku, Toshinori said, I understand that when something awful happens we tend to make very bad choices. Sometimes we do things just to feel like we're in control again, he said, keeping his voice very even. With that said, I have to say I'm also disappointed in your actions. That almost hurt more. He crouched down holding his head in his hands. He'd fucked up. He'd fucked up very badly. Shoto crouched down next to him, rubbing his back gently. Izuku almost wanted to tell him to stop. The contact burned. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Shoto, did you know? Dad asked. Shoto bit his lip. I knew Tuya was coming and going at the apartment. I only found out about the smoking yesterday. He said he wanted to stop after the exam, otherwise, I would have told you. Why didn't you tell me about Tuya? I wanted my brother to have a safe place to go, he said. I care about him. I'm sorry I broke your trust. I'm so sorry, Midoriya-san. Dad sighed. See, that at least makes sense. He turned back to Izuku. Stand back up, he ordered, reaching down. He grabbed Izuku by the upper arms and pulled Izuku to his feet. A sense of panic was boiling in his stomach. Listen to me. I need you to understand how dangerous this was. He changed his grip to grab Izuku by his face and look down at him. You got very lucky that Dabi seems serious about wanting to keep you safe. Though I'm pissed he got you smoking. He at least had the decency to turn around and tell and ask me to get you help. Izuku, I'm worried about you. This was so dangerous. Izuku suddenly felt like he couldn't breathe. His dad was holding his face. The last time he did that, no, that wasn't his father. But it felt like him. Tears leaked down his face. I'm so goddamn angry with you. Dad said, holding his face tightly. You can trust me, I'm your father. Suddenly, he was back in that bar, with All for One's hand on his face. Pain. Overwhelming pain shot through him. His eyes flickered between this space and the bar. All for One was using some type of quirk on him. Something that caused pain on contact. It was the worst thing he'd ever felt. It was like he'd taken a match to all of his nerve endings. Like his skin was being clawed off one patch at a time. Like his bones were being snapped over and over again. Please, he whispered, attempting to pull away from All for One. Don't hurt me. All for One was towering over him. He was going to hurt him again. Izuku was so tired. All for One dropped him at once. Oh my god Izuku, I'd never. He said and took a step back. He crumpled to the ground. Shadow leaned down again but don't. Izuku cried, don't touch me. He placed his hands on the ground. Right. He wasn't in the bar. He was outside. He inhaled deeply, trying to clear his thoughts. Vaguely he could hear Shadow talking to his parents, but he couldn't understand the words. Everything was just too much. Izuku wanted to float away. Like he had before. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want this. He just wanted to move on. He wanted a smoke. He wanted to crawl into bed with Shadow. He wanted to talk about nothing with Tuya. He wanted his dad to tell him he loved him. He wanted Toshinori to tell him he was proud. He didn't want to be a fuck up. He didn't want to be broken. That's what he was, wasn't he? He was broken. All for One had broken him. He'd taken Izuku and shattered him into millions of little pieces. Izuku had picked himself back up, but there were parts still missing. He would never be the same. This was going to stay with him forever. Would he ever get better? Would he ever be able to let people pinch his cheeks again? Would he be able to sleep alone? Could he ever hear the name All for One without shaking? Could Dad ever touch his face again without Izuku breaking down? He needed help. Izuku needed real help. He wasn't sure how long he lay there. Eventually, his heart stopped pounding in his ears. He looked up. Dad was on his knees in front of him. His red eyes were full of concern. Izu? He asked softly, are you back with us? Slowly, he nodded. More of the world came into focus. Toshinori was standing behind Dad, frowning in worry. Shadow was on his knees next to him, hands clenched at his sides. Izuku reached a hand over to him, placing it over Shadow's fist. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. A panic attack, Dad said softly. A bad one. I caused. His voice broke. Izuku, I'm so sorry, I must have triggered you. All for One. A shudder ripped through Izuku's body. He hurt you, didn't he? Izuku gave a quick nod. Why yes, he said softly. He forced his way into my head. And he made me show him memories of Mom. Then he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had a quirk. He used it on me. He hurt me, he whispered. He tortured me. Until I couldn't take it anymore. Suddenly, the dam broke and it all came out. I was already in so much pain. My arm had been broken. The leak threatened to break the other one. I had slept bolted into a chair. They starved me. Tuya was the only one who noticed. I was beaten. Magna slammed my head into her magnet. Himiko, she just, every chance she got, would sit in my lap. She asked invasive questions. He shuddered. She said she wanted to be inside me. He took in a shuddering breath. Shigaraki just treated me like an object the whole time. He just had me there, chained up next to him. They all smelled awful. They just wanted to touch me and prod at me. All for One called me kind. He said that he wanted to break me. That Shigaraki would need me. The fact that they're both still out there makes me sick, he said. I don't want to ever see them again. I don't want to feel that way again. Izu, Dad said, thank you for telling us. He moved closer. Izuku, can I hug you? I don't want. Izuku threw himself into his father's arms. He inhaled the smell of fire and his body relaxed. He didn't know what was wrong with him earlier. Dad was the safest person in the whole wide world. He loved him. He squeezed his arms around his neck. I'm sorry. He whispered. I want to go to therapy. I want to stop smoking. Dad rubbed a warm hand down his back. Izuku relaxed into him further. I know. We're gonna get you help. But you have to rely on me more, okay? Will I still be able to see Tuya? He asked. Shadow hasn't been to see him in a while. They miss each other. Yes, Dad said, but you'll be going with me, okay? No more sneaking off to chain smoke with him. He nodded. Am I in trouble? Dad sighed. I think you have to be, he said. Izu, this was a huge breach of trust. You really put yourself at risk here. I can't let you do something like this again. I've been texting Aizawa. He doesn't know the whole story, but I did share that you were smoking. We decided that you're going on house arrest for 3 days. House arrest? 3 days? What? It means, Toshinori said for 3 days you won't be allowed to leave the dorms. No school, no training, nothing. You'll be on cleaning duty. Oh. He would fall behind if he missed that much. 3 whole days of classes? All that precious time he just got the hang of shoot style too. But it was only 3 days, right? He nodded okay. Xiaodo spoke up, and me? I lied too. I'll talk to your teacher again, and endeavor since he'll have to be notified, but likely the same, Dad said. Izuku almost let out a sigh of relief. If Xiaodo were there then, it wouldn't be so bad. Now. Come on. I'm done yelling. You still passed your test. You deserve a night of celebration with your classmates. We'll start your punishment on Monday. He stood up and took Izuku by the hands and pulled him up too. We'll just tell your classmates about the smoking. And that Xiaodo knew and never said a word. That work for you? They both nodded. Okay, Toshinori said, let's celebrate. Izuku cleaned his face off before anyone saw his snot-covered cry face. The celebration in the dorms was huge. All his classmates were band together, playing games. Dad and Toshinori hung around and got involved. Izuku watched fondly as Ashido and Okako made Dad play Just Dance with them. He had to admit, he felt better. Hopeful, even. He sat curled up next to Xiaodo on the couch, wearing his favorite sweater. The dusty green one with the rabbit on the front. Xiaodo had his arm around him. He hadn't left Izuku's side since the breakdown. He leaned into him, inhaling his sweet campfire smell. He loved him so much. It hit him, every so often, how much he loved him. He just did. Shiro walked back into the common room, holding a soda can. He stopped in front of Izuku and Xiaodo before he asked, so, I hope it's not a bad time, but what happened during the exam? He asked. You know. The whole floating thing. Dad nearly fell over, and Toshinori perked up from his conversation with Kirishima and Kaken. He must have been helping Kirishima comfort him. Floating? Dad asked. Oh, Izuku said right he stood. It slipped my mind, but something weird happened during the exam. Another mutation, he said. Suddenly the whole class had their eyes on him. With a sigh, he reached in and used float. Slowly, he drifted to the ceiling. He turned in the air and sat cross-legged on the ceiling. I can float now. The cries of disbelief were crazy. Okako stood under him. Man, Deku-kun, it's like you don't even need me anymore. She teased. Nat, I'll always need you, Oka. He smiled at her. He stood and flipped, floating back down to the floor. That's Toshinori started. He shook his head, the look on his face a clear we'll talk about that later. Kirishima blinked at him before Kaken leaned over and whispered something to him. Right. Kirishima knew about All for One. Wait. Kirishima was the only one who knew he could give and take quirks that didn't know about All for One being his dad. His face relaxed. Kaken must have fed him a good lie. Right. He probably thought Izuku had stolen the quirk. Suyu hummed, wow, Midoriya-chan. Your quirk is certainly very strange, Kuro. That's its second mutation since school started. I suppose pulling yourself towards things is a logical conclusion though, she said. Certainly makes more sense than the shield mutation, Kuro. Izuku shrugged. I suppose. Guess this is what happens when you combine two totally different quirks. Kind of makes you seem like Peter Pan, Okako said. Little green. Gonna take me to Neverland? He laughed. You're my Tinkerbell then. Since you make other people float. Xiaodo huffed from behind him. You're my Wendy, obviously, he said with a wink. That made Xiaodo smile. So, one more thing that's been bugging me, Shiro said. What did your dad need when you pulled up? Seemed pretty serious. Izuku flushed. He was going to have to tell them anyway. He made eye contact with his dad, who shrugged. It was Izuku's choice on when and how to tell them. He heaved a great sigh. I'm in a bit of trouble, he said finally. Dad snorted. Oh yeah, a bit. Shinsuke and Kaminari rolled into the room. Kaminari was laughing like a madman. He was clutching his phone, a gaudy cheetah print case on it. Dudes, you have got to see the TikTok Hitachi and I just made its freaking hyla. Zero hushed him. Hold on, Midoriya is about to drop a huge bomb on us I think, he said. Read the room dumbass. Kaminari nodded and dropped his phone. Shinso quirked his brow at Izuku. He sighed. Like I said, I got caught doing something I shouldn't have. I've been doing it for the past month or so. Dad found out and I should state I'm also in trouble, Shoto said. Since I knew, and didn't say anything, I'll be sharing Izuku's punishment. We're on house arrest for 3 days, Izuku confessed. I messed up pretty bad and I hope you won't all think less of me for it. Ida walked from his spot in the kitchen and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Whatever it is, I promise we won't. I know you haven't liked talking about it, but we're all aware you haven't exactly been in the best place mentally, given what took place this summer. Whatever it is, I can assure you we won't judge. Izuku smiled up at Ida. He nodded. Thanks. You're a good friend. He took his hand off his shoulder. I'll show you. I doubt half of you would believe me without proof. I'll be right back. He left the room and hit the button on the elevator. He rode it up to the 5th floor and walked right to Shoto's room. He got inside and pulled the pack from his folded up hoodie. He considered taking out one last cigarette but decided against it. He held the pack in one hand and walked back down to the common room. All eyes were on him as he walked up to his dad. He bit his lip and held up the pack. This is all I have, Izuku said. Once everyone saw what he was holding, the reaction was swift and immediate. Smoking. Ida yelled. He quickly composed himself. Midoriya-kun, I know. No. I said I would not judge, but... Shinsuo and Okako were stunned. Shinsuo pointed at him, making a sort of dying noise in the back of his throat. Okako was no better. Deku-kun. Ashido stood, holding her face in her hands dramatically. I can't believe the cinnamon roll was smoking. Ashido screamed. I feel like I've been lied to. What next? You're going to tell me you're not a virgin? Izuku didn't dignify that with a response, simply keeping his focus on his father. Dad opened the pack before he said about a half pack. Hey. I only got it yesterday. Dad balked. That's a lot of smokes in one day, damn Izu. He shrugged. I've been so stressed out. Between the test, getting a handle on my quirk, and ignoring what happened to me. Smoking was one of the only things that made me feel better. But I'm ready to address the problems, he said. Okay. Now, let's get back to partying because most of us got our licenses and I don't want to drag the mood down more by talking about my trauma or my bad habits or... He was cut off by Ida and Okako wrapping their arms around him. Shinsuo and Shoto followed suit. Then Tsuyu and Kaminari, and within a moment all of Class 1A was around him in a big group hug. He blinked. Deku-kun, Okako said softly. We all love you. We've all been worried. You're not dragging the mood down. If anything, you're bringing it up. We're glad you want to move forward. Midoriya-kun, Ida said, I'm very happy you're trusting us all with this. While I must admit I was shocked, I see now that this was a cry for help. As a future hero, your class representative, and also, as your friend, it's my duty to answer that cry. Mido. I knew you were having a bad time, but if I had known you were stressing out this badly I would have been there for you. Shit, the signs were all over the place. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you more, Shinsuo said. I promise buddy, you need a friend. I am there. I'm right next door. Tsuyu was crying. Midoriya-chan, Kuro, she hiccuped. I'm very happy you're telling us. We'll help you. Damn it, Deku. Kiken yelled and forced himself through the massive hug. You idiot, you should have just told us, he said before flicking him in the nose. Stop hiding shit. Think you're better than me? I swear if I catch you smoking after this I'll kill you. Bunny, Shoto whispered, we're all here for you. You don't have to hide. Izuku broke. He cried, long and hard, surrounded by his friends and family. The party had ended. Most of his classmates turned in for the night. Soon the common room was just Izuku, Shoto, Kiken, and his parents. Izuku looked at Kiken. They hadn't really had a chance to talk about his failure. So, Izuku said, how are you feeling, Kiken? Like shit, he said simply. I'm pissed off. I got the score sheet back. I barely failed. My points were taken off for being too rough to the injured, he snarled. But what the fuck can I do? Toshinori sat down next to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. I'm pissed. I failed, again, he said. I failed this summer. Now I failed at this shitty test, he said before. Oh God. Kikin buried his face in his hands, and his back shuddered. He was crying. If I had just been stronger at that stupid summer camp, you wouldn't have had to go through that. All Might wouldn't have. Toshinori grabbed Kikin into a hug. Katsuki, listen to me, he said. What happened was not your fault. Protecting Izuku was not your job. Or Shouto's. It was ours. And we failed. I failed. I was prepared to make that sacrifice. He held him tightly. Kikin was stiff in his arms, crying quietly. Your failure today is not the mark of a bad hero. It's just something to spur you forwards. You'll learn from your mistakes, and someday you'll be a better hero than even me. Kikin didn't say anything after that, just nodded. Eventually, he pulled back. I'm gonna go up, he said. He turned to Izuku and Shouto. That never happened. If either of you say shit to anyone, I'll blast your faces off. With that, he left the room. Toshinori turned to Shouto. And what about you? Failure is a tough pill to swallow. It was my own fault, he said in a low voice. There was a boy from another school I allowed to get in my head. He failed as well, so I'm sure I'll be seeing him at the remedial lessons. Izuku rubbed his back. Yairashi was a dick. I'm serious. If I see him in public, I'll... Izuku, that's not necessary. Shouto cut him off. Dad and Toshinori gave him a questioning look. Izuku nearly fought him at the test this morning. It took me, Shinsuo and Bakugo to hold him back. He said Shouto was just like his father. I wasn't about to let that shit stand. Dad nodded. That's fair. I'd probably have tried to punch him too. Just, don't actually get into a fight with him, okay? You're a handful as it is. I don't need you getting arrested for assault or illegal quirk usage. Shouto continued. Anyway, I'm upset with myself that I let him get between me and my goals. My father hasn't been informed of my failure yet. I'm very afraid of telling him. Shouto, I'll break the news to him, Dad said. I'll explain what happened. Let him yell at me and burn off some of his anger before he gets to you. Shouto sighed in relief, his shoulders losing some of their tightness. You're too kind to me, Midoriya-san. I'm so sorry again for breaking your trust. Dad shook his head. I get it. You're a good kid, Shouto, and you take good care of my son. I won't hold a grudge. Just make smarter choices from here on out, okay? He checked the time. We're gonna head out soon. Mind if we have a minute to talk to Izuku alone? He asked. His boyfriend nodded. Of course. I'll turn in then. Thank you again. Night, Bunny. He said and kissed his forehead. Night, Midoriya-san, Yagi-san. He turned and walked out of the room. Izuku sighed. I'm so sorry again. Dad cut him off with a wave of his hand. Water under the bridge, kiddo, he said. Just take your punishment, no more sneaking out to visit strange villains, and just talk to us. I'm gonna do some research into a therapist for you. I have a few in mind. There's one I've met a few times. Her quirk prevents her from sharing secrets. Very good for security. I've met her on a handful of occasions, Toshinori said. Very kind woman. Izuku nodded. Okay. I'll give it a try. I'm also gonna get you some help in quitting smoking. Nicotine patches, the works. I've quit smoking before, and it sucks. Dad pulled out the pack and opened it. He pulled out 2 cigarettes. Here. He handed them over. Quitting cold turkey when you're in a bad way will only hurt you more. These are your last 2. Do whatever you want with them. Smoke them after we leave, throw them out, save them in a bag in the freezer. Don't care. He took them gently. Are you sure? He asked. Dad nodded. Yes. But that's it, okay? Only those 2. Izuku nodded and stowed them in his pocket. Only these 2, I promise. He felt better knowing he had them. That he still had some control. One more subject. Izuku, Toshinori said, you manifested float. He sprang up. Yet. Nana, she appeared in my head. She was beautiful. And she's been nice to me every time I interact with the vestiges. Toshinori smiled softly. I'm glad to hear she's there. He trailed off. She was a lovely woman, Nana. She is, Izuku said with a smile. We'll work her quirk into your training. Floating is pretty useful. Well, we're out then. Dad stood and held out his arms. Izuku smiled and threw himself into them. I'm still proud of you, he whispered. I know you're having a hard time. It's going to get better, kiddo, I promise. I will do whatever it takes to make you happy and healthy. Just, stop being such a little bastard, okay? He laughed, burying his face into his dad's chest. I love you. I love you too, kiddo. Izuku yawned as he opened the door into Shoto's room. He was in the bed waiting for him, sitting up and reading a book quietly. Shoto smiled softly. How did it go? Good, he said, and went about stripping out of his clothes. He'd already stashed his last 2 cigarettes in a safe place in his room. Dad has some ideas that I think are really gonna help. He stripped the sweater off and peeled himself out of his pants and boxers before grabbing his sweatpants. Shoto watched him, a light blush on his face. I'm exhausted, he said before crawling into bed next to him. Today felt like it was extra long. Shoto nodded, putting his book aside and letting them curl up together. Something has been on my mind. Last night, when we made love, something odd happened. Izuku looked up at him. Odd? Odd how? Well, at one point it was like, we weren't here, he said. I'm not sure how to explain where we were. It was a void. Ooh, Izuku said in understanding. Yeah, that's all for one. My quirk. When I get into my deep head space, I go there. It's where all the quirks are stored. And my subconsciousness, I think. The vestiges of One for All are there too. Oh my god. He sat up. They didn't see, did they? Shoto sat up as well. Wait. The ghosts, right? The previous One for All users might have. Oh god, Izuku, please tell me that's not the case. I don't know. They're not always there. I think they're deeper. They come out when they want to. Nana spoke to me at the exam, and Uncle Yoichi appeared to push All for One out of there when he was torturing me, but I don't think so. His boyfriend shook his head. Wait, but how did I get there? I mean, I think I had my hands on your face, he said, and I was pretty out of it. I dunno if you know this, but your dick feels pretty good. Shoto blushed deeply. I think I pulled you into my mental space. There's only one way to find out if that's the case. Oh. Shoto asked, and what's that? Having sex? Izuku grinned. See if we can't get a repeat. Shoto smacked him with a pillow eventually. But I think if I tried to have sex with you right now, I might actually die of exhaustion. Izuku laughed. Fine, fine. But soon, okay. He kissed Shoto's cheek. I like being connected to you like that. Yeah. Shoto smiled wistfully. Me too. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below, and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.